Welcome back to the morning show here on the Rise News. I am Adesola Omoran.
And I'm Rafai saying it's also a joy having you, Adesola, especially after a great long weekend. And
Indeed.
it's one of the pleasure. I mean, we have some issues on the front burner today in the news, and we're talking to a couple of guests as regards them. Human rights is one of them. You know, the rights of Nigerians, the rights of the citizenry, the rights of people in general. And while I was having a conversation with someone this morning, she was talking about the fact that these rights span across board in society. The court not listening, I mean, people not obeying court orders. That's a violation of human rights, killings, banditry,
no persecution, no prosecution
the
of
infamous
cases.
words of accidental discharge. It's a violation of human rights. So we'll go straight to Jaye this morning and talk about that.
Indeed. Well, the National Day of Mourning is a symbolic action to register citizens' dissatisfaction with the state of national security. As the convener put it, quote, National Day of Mourning and Remembrance is a citizen-led initiative to express solidarity and demand accountability for the security and welfare of Nigerians, end quote. Well, joining us now this morning to discuss this and more is Jaye Gaskiya, Public Affairs Analyst and former presidential candidate in Nigeria. Very great to have you, Mr. Jaye Gaskiya. Thank you so much for making it to the show. Let's just begin by asking, what exactly is the National Day of Mourning? I mean, we know you had this procession on the 28th of May. That's the eve to the inauguration
Day,
handover day. What is the message, and is it resonating? Mr. Jaye, can you hear us?
Hello? Okay.
Great. Thank you for
Okay,
coming on
I can
the
hear
show.
you now.
So I was asking you, we know you are one of the conveners of the National Day of Mourning. Just tell us what exactly the National Day of Mourning is, and the message you're passing, is it resonating?
Well, it is yet, we're yet to see clearly whether the message is resonating. But I think that, to be very clear, what is the National Day of Mourning about? This is an initiative of citizens and civil society organizations. And this initiative started more than a year ago. Basically, last year, we decided to have an inaugural procession and a day to mark the Day of Mourning, and we call it Day of Mourning and Remembrance. And so we chose May 28th because we felt that it was a day to inauguration. It was a day to Democracy Day then, and that we didn't want it to be swamped with Democracy Day. But this year, it was a day to inauguration, and we felt that we needed to deliver a very significant and important message. And what is this message? The message is very simple. We are saying that very clearly, that the responsibility to protect is that of state entities globally. That is already recognized by various international treaties and conventions of which Nigeria is a party. And then we also know that by virtue of our constitution, that also the well-being and security of citizens is also the primary purpose of government, Section 14B of the Constitution. So. But we live in a state, we live in a country and in a situation where human life has become really valueless, where like every day, every minute, there are always reports and incidences of life being taken, innocent life being taken and just taken in a very heartless manner through various forms of atrocities. Now, the National Day of Mourning is specifically targeting lives lost through atrocities, committed lives that have been lost through violent crimes. And by this, we are talking about insurgency in the Northeast. We are talking about the herders-farmers conflicts in the, basically in the North Central, but virtually all over the country now. We are talking about banditry in the Northwest. We are talking about intra and intercommunal conflicts all over the country. And then, of course, we are also talking about, extrajudicial killings, by the security agencies and law enforcement agencies. And so these are the lives that have been lost to atrocity. And we are saying that enough is enough. We are saying that we cannot, as a nation, be comfortable with a situation where we live, where we lose 3,000, 10,000, 20,000 of our citizens within a very short, space of time, and we think that things are normal. So that's the essence, and the message is that enough is enough. The message is that the government, the state has a responsibility to protect citizens, and that the state must take on its responsibility. But beyond that, the message is also to Nigerian citizens that human life has value, and that we must become our neighbors' keepers. We must value the life of our neighbors as much as we value our own lives. And that's the only way in which we can actually build a nation that all of us will be proud of, a nation that, will be fit for purpose for its citizens.
Right. Jaye, a lot of people will say, how can we truly have a society that values life when even some sections of the civil society have been compromised?
Yeah. Well, you see, unfortunately, let's be very clear about this. You cannot have an island of sanity in a sea of insanity. We have a society where all our values have become perverted, largely because of the failure of governance, the failure of the delivery of public services, and the rest of that. So human beings have become very highly competitive, so much so that we have individuals believing that their progress is based on the lack of progress of their neighbors, and that they have to compete for everything. So that's the kind of society that we live in at the moment, and that's the society that we need to change. We need to then have a society where leadership is responsible, and where it is also possible, for public services to be delivered as at when due, and to be delivered qualitatively.
Well, let's look at, the responsibility of government, which is protecting lives and property. But it would seem as if the civil society and your group is just knocking on the doors of the federal government. How about the state governors? Recently, during the Democracy Day speech, the president did say that some ethnic, political, and religious leaders are responsible for inciting some of these clashes we have seen. What did you make of that statement by the president?
Let's be very clear about one thing. Many of the crises that we have in the country arise as a result of the fact that we have certain basic factors already on the ground. So you have poverty, you have the fact that people illiteracy, you have the fact that people are out of school, you have the fact that people are jobless. All of this predispose to violence. They don't necessarily lead to violence, but they predispose to violence. Now, you put on top of this a situation where you now have, a political elite that is completely irrational and completely irresponsible. You have a political elite that mobilizes every grievance in a very antagonistic manner in order to achieve their very selfish aims. And so, yes, a number of these crises, although they have roots in all of these foundational defects in our society, but they have become factors that have become politicized, and that are now grievances that have been mobilized, by the elites, particularly by the political elites, in order to satisfy their own selfish interest. Now, the way out of this is that, and you are right, the problem is not just with the federal government, and it is not the responsibility of the state as federal government alone. It's the responsibility of all the state in terms of all of its levels: federal, state, local government, as well as all of its arms of government, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. But you see, we have a constitutional anomaly here. We have a situation where the Constitution says that security is on the exclusive list, and therefore it is a federal government responsibility. But we also have a constitution that also says, that also gives the powers to the state legislatures to legislate for the peace and well-being of the states. So you have that contradiction. And then we also have security agencies, which by the very nature of their constitutive acts, the laws that set them up, they are actually federal institutions. So this is what we need to untangle. We need to have a situation where everywhere in the world, the best practice is, and what has been effective, is that internal security is policing-led. It is civil authority-led. It is not military-led. We have a situation in our country where across more than 32 states of the Federation, you have the military playing police roles in different joint task forces for internal security operations. This is an anomaly, and we need to stop that anomaly. We need to actually fund the police and other security agencies, and we need to also decentralize policing and devolve policing powers so that we can have policing powers at state and local government levels.
Jaye, I'd like to disagree with you strongly as regards that. It is only a situation where the need arises that it happens. I was in Paris sometime last year, and I saw military officers carrying guns parading the halls of Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. You know why? Because of the terrorism constantly going on in Paris. So the military was carrying guns and parading. They had live weapons, combat ready, parading. But also, I just want to also talk you through the lines of this security votes. Security votes. Isn't the state governor the people you should knock on their doors at because they have the arsenal to be able to bring security through security votes? And what's your view about security votes in all of this?
Okay. But very quickly, before I go to security votes, let me just make a very quick comment about the situation and the instance that you mentioned in Paris. You know, these are countries that have a system in place for doing security threat analysis. And from time to time, from identifying where the most severe security threats are. And in the context of counterterrorism, their international airports have become targets for terrorist attacks. And so they have, in the context of that analysis, they have become that. And therefore, the military and counterterrorism forces are deployed to that area. You wouldn't see the military just anywhere on the street. Yes, absolutely. So that's the point that I'm making. That if you need to do that, you don't need the military, for example, in instances and a situation where you have kidnappings, where you have this. We should strengthen the police to do that. When you have severe threats that have overwhelmed the police, that's what we need to do. Let me give you an example. In the 2018 budget, the military, the Nigerian army alone had 75 billion naira for special projects, which are its internal security operations. This money could have been used to properly equip the police to play that same role. We can create units within the police that can play that role and play it effectively. That's the point that I'm making. But back to security votes. It is an anomaly. It is seriously an anomaly. And it is not expected by our constitution. It's actually a constitutional violation, all these issues around security vote. Because you have a situation where these security votes are not even subject to any oversight. They cannot be audited by and you don't need to actually do any form of accounting, render any form of accountability.
Okay, Jaye, we'll go to a break. We'll be right back. We'll go to a break quickly. We'll be right back. Huh? Right, still the morning show here on Arise News. I'm Rufai Hussaini, and I've got Adesua with me, and we've been talking to Jaye Gaskiya, public affairs analyst, on National Day of Mourning and other issues. So, Jaye, before we went on that break, we're talking about security votes, and you had some views as regards that, Jaye.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. So, I was saying that look, if no money, according to our constitution, no expenditure can be made by the executive without appropriation by the legislature. And so if the state assemblies have the power to appropriate for security vote, then it is their responsibility to also legislate on how the security vote will be spent. That's the point, and that's what is missing right now. We have a situation where governors are just giving blank checks. They request for so amount for security vote, and that amount is appropriated by the legislature without any strings attached. We are saying that it is irresponsible of the legislature to do that. It is the duty of the legislator to say that if we have the power to appropriate for this, then we must also have the power to actually establish and enact a legislation to guide how and set criteria for how security votes are going to be spent. Because if that is then done, then we can properly monitor this security vote, and then it can be properly used. Some states have actually also passed laws to create neighborhood watches, to create vigilantes, to set them up in law, and to ensure that they now work with the police. Now, we would then expect that rather than have a security vote for a state governor, you should actually have a security budget for these your security institutions at the state level. That should be the way to go. That's the responsible and proper thing to do. And that's what civil society has been urging state governments to do. Last year, we did a report. Civil Society Networks did a report on how security votes have been spent. And we found out that in over a year, in about 2 years, over 240 billion naira was budgeted for security votes across the country. And you can imagine what that could have done if it was actually spent on tackling insecurity at the various states, or if this money was actually spent on that.
How was
so
that
it's a responsibility of the executive, but more importantly, that of the legislature.
Jaye, how was that 240 billion naira budgeted for security votes all over the country spent by your report? How was it spent? What quota of that money was actually given to insecurity challenges in the country?
Absolutely nothing. I mean, we didn't find any direct evidence of the fact that, okay, this was the security vote for a particular state, and that security vote went actually into, say, a neighborhood watch or to support the police force. And so we never saw any such evidence. Because in any case, the governors are not even, by law, bound to account for how that money is spent. Which is what they now use, which has become money for the boys and money for the girls and the rest of that. And that's why a key point of our recommendation is that, first, our main recommendation is that stop the incidence of security votes entirely. Let us face the question of decentralizing and devolving policing powers. The second thing is that if there must be security votes, then there must be legislation by the state executive and by the state legislature to actually set criteria for how security votes are going to be utilized. Because right now, it is an avenue for fraud, an avenue for corruption.
Indeed, you just took that right out of my mouth, because we do know that the president has ordered the Inspector General of Police and the Solicitor General of the Federation to come up with recommendations on how to implement a white paper following the Ojukwu Committee on Human Rights Violations by SARS. And I'm sure you're aware of the recommendations. One of it is to create state and local government policing. What other recommendations do you have? Would you be suggesting to the IG of Police and the Solicitor General at this time?
Very simply, I am wary. I am an advocate of decentralized and devolved policing. Nowhere in the world is policing centralized the way it is centralized in Nigeria, not even in unitary states. Much less federal states. Well, having said that, I am wary about simply just saying state police and local government police in Nigeria in this context without certain caveats. So this is my recommendation to the committee that is looking at this, and eventually to this National Assembly that is going to work on this. First, there are certain issues that we need to understand when we talk about state policing. State policing is about policing is part of a broader security and law enforcement and justice sector operation. So if you are reforming policing and we are devolving policing powers, there are also certain other powers that must also be devolved and decentralized. So, for example, we will need to devolve and decentralize judicial powers. We need to devolve and decentralize custodial powers, that is prisons and custodial environments. You cannot have a state policing unit enforcing a state police, a state legislation and trying to curb a state crime and prosecuting in a federal court and then sentencing people to serve their sentences in federal courts. So when we are talking about all of this, we need to see the ramifications of what we are talking about. So we would need to have state prisons. We would need to have state judicial commissions that are actually truly independent. So we would have to have a situation where, this relationship between the state judicial commission and the federal judicial commission, we need to really think it through again as well. So then, but having also said that, what about the policing units themselves? we have to look at, so this committee has to look at the question of the issue of a cross-jurisdiction issues. So if a crime, let's take the Abuja-Kaduna expressway, highway, and then the crimes that are being committed there, as an example. I mean, you are looking at the Federal Capital Territory, you are looking at Kaduna State, you are also looking at Katsina and some other states. Now, so what happens in a situation where a criminal commits an offense in a particular state, but the criminal is resident in state B, commits an offense in state A, but then flees to state C after committing the crime? So how would the police forces of the 3 different jurisdictions now, state jurisdiction, how will they coordinate in terms of this, in terms of apprehending this criminal and solving this crime? We have to be clear on what the criteria would be. We have to be sure that it is where the crime is committed. It is the policing unit of that state, of that jurisdiction, that will take the lead. But that policing unit would have to collaborate and coordinate with the other policing units, including the federal police, because now it has crossed state boundaries. So, we need to look at how we sort out jurisdictional issues. And right now, we have a situation where law enforcement agencies don't coordinate. So we need to look at that. Then the final point is, for me, how do you recruit into a state police force? So I'm asking myself, if there is a state police force for Benue State, for example, how do you recruit into it? Are you going to recruit residents of Benue State or indigenes of Benue State? If it is a state police force for Lagos State, are you going to recruit residents of Lagos or indigenes of Lagos? Because if we go the indigene way, then what we are creating are ethnic militias that are armed and legalized, and not state policing units. It has to be on the basis of residency. And all these points need to be addressed clearly.
Pertinent points you have raised there, Mr. Gaskiya. But let's quickly look at another matter, because in the last elections, you were a player. I don't know if you have seen the recommendations of the EU on the 2019 elections released over the weekend, and 7 prioritized one. What's your take on the outcome of the elections as reported by the EU? Because we see that the 2 leading political parties that were indicted in that election and in that report, are latching on to the narrative that suits them the most so far. As a member of civil society and someone who declared for presidency in that election, what's your take on the report?
The first thing is that I think the report simply confirms what some of us have always said. My point going into the 2019 election, my point of view, is that everywhere I've said that the biggest threat to Nigeria's democracy and the democratization process and to our elections is not really any longer institutional. It is actually the political elites. That's our biggest threat. It is the way and manner that the political elites undo the democratic process, undo governance, and undo the electoral process. That's the challenge. Let me ask you a question. In which other country in the world is the central bank, does the central bank become the place where you store ballot papers and election materials? In which other country in the world? It's only in a country where the political elites are so distrustful of one another that we must create, different specific institutions and bastardize the function of specific institutions in order to safeguard against their corrupting influences. And so for me, I think that, yes, we need to deal with the biggest challenge that we need to deal with is a reform of our political parties and the political party processes. It's not just a question of internal democracy, not just a question of party funding, but also the question of the nature and the character of the party. What is the nature and the structure of our parties? Our parties are not membership-based parties. Our parties are stock exchanges where stock brokers and stockholders, transact business. They are not membership-based. They are not parties where members actually have any authority. Where do you even have any members? I challenge you today, if you ask political parties to present their membership registers, if they can present a membership register. You will find names that are present on the register of several political parties, because I mean the people just bring people in towards ward congresses and when you are preparing for elections and the rest of that, in order to cast votes and to get the outcome that they want. So that's important. We need to reform. We need to also face. We have reformed INEC to a very large extent and degree. We have also reformed the police to a large extent. Now we need to reform the political parties. We need to also ensure. We know that we have issues with election security. So what that tells us is that the police should have a permanent election security operations department and unit. It should not be ad hoc. So this police department should take the lead and should be trained and prepared for taking the lead for election security. And strategic and critical infrastructures should be guided by them during elections and the rest of that. And then I think also that the question of electronic voting is also very important. Because if we are doing electronic voting, you don't need party agents.
Okay, Jaye, thank you so much for being part of the morning show on Arise News today. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you, Jaye.